Thank you for joining us for tonight's Flourishing Futures event. My name is Sibongile Nkosi, and I'm also known as Rose. My background basically is in advocacy, health advocacy in South Africa. And currently what I do is look at systems change work in South Africa. And I'd like to basically welcome everyone for tonight's webinar. I'm quite excited about especially tonight's topic around flourishing futures. And I think we're at a time when the world is shifting, there's so much uncertainty at the moment with COVID-19. And I think this is such an important topic, flourishing futures. But I think from when I was looking at the topic myself, looking at it from a biodiversity is also quite an interesting topic. So yeah, so just to kick off the program, I'm going to invite Devendri to just tell us about the World Environment Day, and yeah. So welcome, Devendri.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Rose. And hi, I'm Devendri from the Brahma Kumaris. I'm a teacher of meditation, and I also, my job is that I'm an occupational therapist working in the field of mental health. And this period of time between the 22nd of May and tomorrow, the 5th of June, has been very special. It's a period of time that has been declared by the United Nations Environment Program to honor World Environment Day. World Environment Day is actually tomorrow, the 5th of June. And the people of the world who are environmental activists or who have a special love in terms of the environment and wanting to care and protect the environment have been encouraged to raise awareness. And the specific theme for this year is biodiversity. And biodiversity encompasses all living forms, whether in the air, on land, or in the sea, fauna, flora, and celebrating the way every single species from all of these aspects actually work together as a coherent whole. And the United Nations Environment Program actually has a very special group, which is called the Major Group for Children and Youth, which is really the voice of the young people. And the Brahma Kumaris is actually has representation in the United Nations Environment Program, but also in the Major Group for Children and Youth. And so this particular program is a response to a call by the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP's Major Group for Children and Youth, where different young people from different organizations around the world were asked to mobilize the young people in their communities and countries to come together to talk about and to discuss biodiversity. And the specific angle or approach that we are introducing in the field of biodiversity and the protection of the environment is a concept of flourishing. And that's the reason why we chose this very beautiful topic, which is called Flourishing Futures. And so I would like to request for the images of the scenes of nature to come forward onto the screen, because that's going to lead us into our first part of the program, which is our icebreaker. Okay, is it possible to share screen so that we can see the images, the nature images? It doesn't actually matter. I think there might be a slight technical problem, but I'd like to just explain this game to you. And even if you aren't able to see any images on the screen in front of you, I'd like for you to call up an image in the screen of your mind. I want you to select any aspect of nature. It could be from flora, it could be from fauna, plant life, wildlife, an animal, anything that you feel really, there we go. There's some images that's coming up now. Anything that you feel really resonates with your personality, something that you see in one specific aspect of nature, which is very similar to your personality. The images that are in front of you are of plants, but you can select anything, an animal, a bird, sea life. And I want you to just take a few seconds to think about what is it about your inner qualities and your inner characteristic that is very similar and that makes you identify with this aspect of nature? What connects you to this aspect of nature? And feel free to type out your responses on the chat if you are on our Zoom call. We'd like to actually hear from you on the chat as to what aspect of nature you resonate with and feel is very similar to your personality. So go ahead for a few seconds. As you're thinking about it, I'll share for myself that I really love the dolphin. And for me, I feel that what is similar between myself and a dolphin is that it's very loving and friendly, but it's also very strong and very firm. And so that balance between being firm and friendly. Okay, I see. I can see some responses coming up on the chat. That's wonderful. So share with us what aspect of nature you've chosen and also the similarity in terms of your inner qualities and your personality with that aspect of nature. The eagle because of the love for freedom and the love for solitude. Trees because of the rootedness and service to the community by providing oxygen. Anything with wings because it represents no limitations. The sky because it's quite ambitious, just like myself. There's no limit. The owl, which is the love of knowledge and wisdom. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing. And for the rest of you, I hope that you give some time to think about this. Now I'd like to actually hand back over to Rose, and she'll take us through the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devendri, for this. And so we're about to basically start our panel discussion. And before we start, we have we have some few speakers with us, and we'll start by then. But just to give a short bio of each speaker, and then what we'll do is that we'll go into discussions. And just as a start, I'd like to ask that all the participants, if you have any questions, that you drop them in our chat. And I think we've created a chat so that you'd be able to drop them onto our chat. I want to apologize for my lighting. I've just realized that my video is appearing very, very dark. So I'd like to apologize for that. And I think the most important thing is that people can hear my voice. So to introduce my panel, I'll start with Deidre Jubet from Wildlife Free Center, and has opened a wildlife rehabilitation center in Hartbeespoort. She has 8 years experience in indigenous wildlife rehabilitation, and is also a member of the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Fraternity. One of the center's primary motive is to educate our youth on the importance of living in harmony with nature, caring for our biodiversity. And Deidre, just to start with our question, since your focus is around young people, can you maybe just tell us what is the importance, of nurturing our biodiversity, and what does it mean for our future, and what does it look like for our future? So yeah.
Hi, everybody. It means, our education lies in our future and our youth. If we don't teach our youth how to look after Mother Nature and nature, fauna and flora, they will have nothing to go on. I mean, they have to teach their kids. It's just, we need to go back to the old days where our fathers taught us how to appreciate nature, and we need to take that through to our kids, and that's the most important thing. And how to look after after wildlife and fauna, and to live in harmony with Mother Nature.
Deirdre, I'm very interested to hear a little bit more about the type of work that you do. I just read the profile and I saw many beautiful images. So can you share the excitement and the love with us? Share some stories.
Yes, so there's a lot of stories. I grew up on a farm in Rustenburg, and it was a family game farm, and I've learned a lot from my dad. My dad taught me how to love animals, how to look after them, obviously the old way, because it changes every year, because we have to get supplement feed, and luckily there's a lot of scientists who look after those animals or look at the supplement feeding that we can get them. What I do is I've got actual fact 15 years experience in wildlife rehabilitation. I've done all my courses. I do from small bees to big animals like buffalo. And my love grew by, I just came upon a little bird, and there was a rehab center in Johannesburg where I stayed. And I picked it up and I started Googling, okay, what do I do? And I was already 30, 32. And I took it to the rehab center. As I walked in there, I could feel the love and the care of nature. And I completely fell in love with it. And I knew, I was busy with my BCom entrepreneurial, and I knew it has to take a backseat. I want to do wildlife rehabilitation and mean something and just give back, and not just give back to Mother Nature, everything that we have taken from her, just to help her and look after our ecosystem.
That's great. And what are some of the current things that your center is engaged in? Can you give us the picture of it?
Yes, we are currently busy with tagging snakes. It's from your black mambas to your boomslang, monitor lizards, just to see, there's a lot of, we get a lot of calls for snakes in houses or close to people's living area. So there's lots of rumors that snakes always goes back to where they, that you can take them kilometers away and then they will always come back. And by chipping them and chip all the endangered snakes like your black mamba, your Mfezis, which is your Mozambican spitting cobras, and by catching and recapturing them and find out where we release them, how far we got them, if there's a recapture, and see if it's more males, more females and stuff like that. And then of course we're busy with the snake project, and then I'm busy with a lot of babies. I can show you one baby that I'm busy with owls. And this one came in. It's a barn owl. He came in. He came in 2 days ago, and
hello.
And yeah, so it's all animals. The project is project that we're going to launch now is with TB for with our Bana mongooses, and I love research and see where we can help. Because the problem is with our encroachment of the environment, there is a lot of animals that gets more viruses, and I would love to see why and how we can help them, and maybe get educate the public, educate people, educate the youth. That's the most important thing for me, because if you don't educate those people, they will never know, and they will never grow and love Mother Nature and look after our environment. So teaching is the most important thing for me.
That's great, Deirdre. And do you think, not do you think, has it been easy, if I can ask, or have you encountered little hiccups along the way? Have there been challenges?
Yes, the most challenge is there has been hiccups. We're non-profit, so we all know how it goes with a non-profit. But the hiccups mainly is if people keeping wildlife as pets and trying to explain to them that no wildlife should belong in a cage or as a pet, and get those animals from the public and then, reintroduce back to the wild. 90% of the time they've been they've been fed what humans feed. So you have to get him back to his natural food source. And of course, the most heartbreaking thing is if you battle to save an animal's life for 3 days and afterwards he just gave up. He just gives up. And what I've realized is that once that animal has given up on life, there's nothing you can do about it but let him go. And that's the most heartbreaking that you can go through. And it's not a business for sissies. I mean, like I said to my volunteers, we will always cry when we lose an animal, but we will celebrate our wins as if it is the first. Just to make
that's a very beautiful, that's a beautiful mindset. Because actually, I was just going to ask you, what do you do on the inside to keep yourself strong and face that? But I guess that's basically what you've shared. And is there anything more that you'd like to share about how you continue keeping that courage and moving forward.
Family, volunteers. My volunteers keeps me grounded. My family keeps me grounded, and just the love of animals. Where you lose one, you win the other one, and everything. If I lose an animal, my husband always comes to me and said to me, "Deirdre, you lost this one, but how many have you released back to the wild? So don't give up. You're doing a great job." And if it wasn't for my husband, I probably would have thrown it in the towel a long time ago.
It's so inspiring to hear you, but it's also so heartbreaking. It's like bittersweet, you know.
It is.
And I think it's so real. You're giving us a real hands-on salt of the earth account and experience, which is wonderful.
I love my work. I will never. I was blessed to have the ability to do this, and I will never give it up, because that's what I'm here for. That's what I've been put on earth, is to do this. And it took me 30 years before I realized it, but I'm staying. I love it.
Okay, that's great. It's great. And I mean, I'm so grateful to have heard your story. It's very encouraging, very inspiring. Thank you. Thank you very much, teacher. So I think that we'll move on now. Rose? Have we lost Rose? Okay. So I think with technology, we might have just lost Rose for a few seconds. And just because we want to move on in terms of time, I'd like to introduce the next speaker. I want to introduce Kirtanya Lakshminarayan, who serves as a conservation scientist at the World Wildlife Federation of South Africa. She holds a master's degree in biological sciences with a focus on marine biology, from organizing the first ever Africa Student Energy Summit to representing South Africa at the World Student Environmental Summit. Kirtanya has been involved in numerous other prestigious initiatives, both locally and internationally. She was voted as part of Mzansi's Top 100 of 2017 in the Healer category for her environmental work. Kirtanya is on the board of the Southern African Communities Environment Initiative, and that's the organization that she's actually representing today. So warm welcome to Kirtanya.
Thank you so much, and for saying my name so perfectly. Not something I come by very often these days.
Hi, and lovely to see your face finally.
You too. Thanks everyone for being here and for the opportunity. I'm going to share some of my personal experiences with you today, not in the form of a very formalized speech, but just from my heart. I have a few pictures to share with you as well, so I hope that the screen is visible. Is it good?
Yes, it is. It's good.
Okay. So let's get straight to it. When you look at this picture, you can see diversity, the biodiversity that we spoke about earlier. And in that is some kind of connectedness. We essentially are nature, and everything in nature has some kind of purpose or plays a role in this intricate ecosystem that we are a part of. A lot of problems, unfortunately, come from the fact that we place ourselves at the top of this ecosystem. And we've made it something more of an ecosystem. And humans actually have such a critical role to play in this biodiverse system. We're actually a part of that. But unfortunately, by putting ourselves at the top, by making ourselves seem more important than the rest of creation, it's actually caused a lot of problems. I'm not here to speak about the problems today because I'm sure we all know a lot of the devastation that is going on in the world right now. But I am here to say that we definitely need to move from this ecosystem to ecosystem and placing ourselves within the circle of life, essentially. So what I think is really important to let you know from my personal experience is how science and spirituality somehow are not mutually exclusive. And that might come as a shock to some of you, but as a professional scientist and as someone with deep spirituality, I've studied quite deeply into both of them. I know I look really young, but I'm really scholarly. I study a lot, I read a lot, and I love learning about science and all things spiritual. So as I delve deeper into both of these streams of life, I found that they actually converge quite beautifully. And there's a lot more that they have in common that they have different. And I think it's so important to realize the link between the two. So if you look at the pictures in front of you, the one on the bottom right is myself barefoot on cracked ground at the Theewaterskloof Dam in Cape Town in the midst of the drought quite recently. It was an apocalyptic experience. It was really like something out of a horror movie, and it was something that I definitely don't wish for anyone else to experience in their lifetime. It really brought to my attention on this research trip that water is actually sacred. And as much as we can talk about the science of it and talk about the research behind it, at the end of the day, water is sacred, it is life-giving, it's something we all need. Something that supports our biodiversity and so many species that are all so important on this planet. And on the left is an image shortly afterwards where it was an interfaith gathering giving thanks to our streams of water. So there were multiple faiths involved in this, and it was a really beautiful ceremony where we actually gave thanks for our water. And it's something so easy to forget, yet something so extremely important. And that just brings me to the image on the top right, which was an event around a scientific publication. But that image for me is something so important because it shows the world underwater. So I'm a marine biologist, and not everyone gets to see the unseen, under our water. So the point here is also to really hold close the things that we not only see, but so much in our world that we might not see on a daily basis, like our sharks, our marine species, and things that are critical to our ecosystem. So this brings me to something that I find myself doing a lot of in my career and out of it, and that's communication, education, awareness. And that's in the form of, whether it's writing an article, giving a speech, presenting research, or just speaking from the heart, like I am today. But being able to find ways and means to connect with people and to spread a message that's important to you. And for me, that's the environment. That's something that's close to me, and I try so hard to talk about this and to highlight its importance in our life. So science communication is also something very interesting because it takes very technical information about our environment and the crises we're facing on our planet to make it accessible to everyone, whether you're a scientist or not. So I find myself working with chefs on things like sustainable seafood. I find myself working with videographers and script writers on education, material, and resources, and a diversity of people that as a marine biologist, I never imagined I would be able to do, all in the name of creating awareness. So moving from awareness is action and sustainable action. So I think one mistake that we could make is to think that awareness equates to action. And for me, that is such a critical part of my work because I work in behavior change and something called conservation psychology, and looking at something called the intention action gap. A lot of us know what's right and what's wrong. We know not to be angry, for example, but we still get angry. We might know that we should be recycling a lot more, but we don't necessarily do it. And it's a very interesting part of human behavior because we all want to do better. It doesn't mean we necessarily are. So a lot of my work as a conservation scientist at WWF is to bridge that gap between awareness and action, and to inspire action in ways that people can implement in their daily life. And this speaks to multiple images on this slide. And for example, on the bottom right, we can look at something like sustainable seafood. I myself don't consume seafood, but for people who do, there are ways to do it. There are good ways to do it and not so good ways to do it. And we take very complex science and try and distill it into easy ways for people to make sustainable choices in their daily lives, in their consumption patterns. And similarly with plastic pollution, we all know that has such a huge impact on our marine life and just general wildlife. And so, looking at our daily consumption patterns, what we're supporting, what we're buying, how we're finding alternatives, finding ways to reduce our plastic use are really small and important ways to play a massive role in conserving biodiversity. So, for example, we get entanglements and plastic ingestion in some of our most charismatic marine animals like whales and turtles. And it's really sad to see this at the expense of our wildlife. And it's a human behavior that can be so easily changed. And we often don't think about these little ways that we can make changes. And so these kinds of messages are so important to just take heed of and spread the word. Another one is food waste. So we don't think about where our food comes from, all the resources that went into, growing that one carrot. And yet for us, it's so easy to waste that piece of food on our plates. When you trace it back, you really realize that our environment is so critical in supporting our lives that we don't think of this. But when we do think of it, we value our daily food and sustenance so much more. And these are small ways to really value our environment that's so much part of our lives. I just have a few pictures here as well about some climate activism, and that's something SAFC is really, really involved in. And also simple things like, reforestation events. So I've been part of planting tens of thousands of trees around the country and with the organization called Green Pop. And, these are small ways to connect with nature and get involved in your communities and really help to restore our biodiversity, removing alien vegetation, growing indigenous plants, even in your own gardens. It doesn't have to be large scale. But these are sustainable actions you can take to make a difference to our planet. And then supporting causes like local agriculture, regenerative agriculture. There's so much that we can support, from the comfort of our own homes. And so that's what I want to draw your attention to on this slide. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the word ahimsa. It's a Sanskrit word. It loosely translates to non-violence or compassionate living, or living in a way that does not harm anyone around you. And I hold that very dearly to me. And I just want to highlight that, it's so easy for us to associate with the ocean or with our dogs and cats, our pets, things that are close to us. And then there's animals and maybe parts of nature that maybe we don't hold as close to us. And so today I'd like to challenge you as well to maybe think about those animals. Maybe you don't like snakes, or, whatever animal it is that you don't really hold as close to your heart as maybe your pet, and try and extend that circle of compassion. It really is quite an amazing experience. And whether it's wildlife or domestic animals or, livestock, we can always think of all sentient beings equally and try to live our lives in a way that does not harm them. For me, that's translated to a conscious diet and what I like to call a cruelty-free diet, which is plant-based. So you can start by having a meat-free Monday day a week, and you'd be amazed at how great you could feel. And it's really good for the environment and our biodiversity. So compassionate living, I think, is something so important to cultivate and to incorporate in our daily lives. And I thought that was just something so important that I wanted to share. And lastly, reflecting our deepest values. Everyone has a different background, life path, learnings, teachings, experiences, and people that we have around us. And I just included some of that on this slide in the form of diverse people from different walks of life that I've been fortunate to come across in my life, who've made impressions on my life, whether it be books or practices or people or your religion, your spirituality. These are ways to really strengthen your own sense of self and really reflect on what's important. And we find at the end of the day, especially through work with SAFC, which links multiple faith communities for the environment, that as different as we can be, we have the same human values that we all hold close to us. We all value love, respect, tolerance. We all want these things. So I think it's important we also think about giving these things as well to each other and to nature. And this is the kind of space that, nurturing our environment and creating a flourishing biodiversity, this is where it comes from. And often we get so caught up in the science and, the actions and are we doing enough? But, just taking that first step or connecting with people can be so important in that journey to valuing our biodiversity. So just to end off, I want to say that SAFC is very involved in climate justice, food justice, animal advocacy. So if you are interested in being part of that, that's one avenue to do so, to support our environment. And also through SAFC, I've made a new best friend. If you look on the bottom left, it's a Khoisan chief. So there's also a lot of great other benefits that you get from interacting with like-minded communities that value the same things. So at the end of the day, I think we need the planet a lot more than it needs us. And so I think it's our duty to act with this compassion so we can have the flourishing biodiversity that we all want. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Kirtanya. There's been so much of reflection and so much of deep thinking that you've put into your presentation, and the images all have so much meaning. And I'm so impressed because you've had a multitude of different experiences all crammed into those collages. It would be wonderful if we had more time to listen to the things that you have to share, but maybe we'll come back to you in the question and answer session. Thank you very, very much. I especially love the ego versus ecosystem and ecosystem. And I love how you integrated the human being into that circle. That's just an amazing concept. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to now introduce all of you to our next guest speaker, who's Robin. Robin is a passionate and enthusiastic nature guide from South Africa. And she's taken guests on wildlife safaris and shared her knowledge and love for nature over the past 10 years in game reserves such as Shlushlui, Mfolozi, Isimangaliso Wetland Park, and the famous Kruger National Park. Many beautiful places, and Robin hopes to inspire people to reconnect with nature by helping them interpret, understand, and interact with nature in a new and interesting and informed way. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about this new, interesting, and informed way. And I'd like to welcome Robin.
Thank you, Devendri. Thank
There
you.
you are. Hello. Hi.
Hi, everyone. Oh yeah, thank you for allowing me to be here and to chat with you guys. I've very much enjoyed the talk so far. Very informative and inspiring. I'd just like to just add my little 2 cents about it all. We are very blessed to live in the 3rd most biologically diverse country in the world. And it is our job to protect the biodiversity by re-establishing a love for the natural environment around us and understanding the value and importance of each link in the web of life. And no matter how big or small the role is. And we need to see ourselves as part of nature and not something separate or above, like excuse my pronunciation, Critania stated before. As a nature guide, it's my job to connect people with nature and interpret what's going on around us in the bush. And it helps them understand the importance of each organism's role and how we are all interconnected. And every organism has a vital role to play in maintaining the natural ecosystem that is around us and that a lot of us take for granted. And this biodiversity is under threat due to human actions. And due to our actions, we create an imbalance in the system. And once the system starts to be imbalanced, it starts to collapse. And in my opinion, us as a species have become very disconnected from nature. And which is why we are facing a lot of the problems and challenges we are today. And we should try and spend some quality time and immerse ourselves in the beautiful and wonderful healing powers of nature for at least an hour a day, I think so. And soak up the energizing rays of the sun and be grateful for all the organisms working tirelessly around us to maintain the beautiful ecosystem around us. And we should be grateful for the fresh air, the birds, the bees, and the beauty, because by us being grateful for those things, it will encourage more growth in the ecosystem around us. And I've put together a little virtual game drive, if you'd like. It's just
that sounds so exciting.
It's just a few of the pictures and stuff of the things I've gotten to experience as my time as a nature guide. And I just hope you'll enjoy it. It's just a few photos. Get it for you now. Okay. There we go. Cool. Yeah, that's just a bit of like what I get up to as a guide, and yeah, I strive to try and encourage a love for nature when I have people on the back of my vehicle, and yeah, try and inspire them to connect and establish an appreciation for nature and the value of each organism.
Yeah, all of us have been trapped during lockdown, and then you set us free when you took us on the virtual safari. And it's so refreshing. Thank you so much. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
And I really agree with you that nature has so much of healing properties. And I must say, I'm guilty. I don't spend much time outside, certainly not 1 hour soaking up the sunshine. So it's a very, very beautiful, practical tip that you've given us. Thank you. And the one thing that I feel came out so much from what you shared was gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so everybody, we're going to say goodbye and thank you to Robin. And I want to now introduce you to our next very lovely speaker, Sandika Babulal. Sandika is a consultant ophthalmic surgeon from South Africa, born in South Africa, but very recently moved to London to further her career. Sandika has been involved in different youth environmental programs, both on the local South African platform as well as the global platform. She was also the first South African facilitator in the Antarctic Youth Ambassador Program, which formed part of the International Antarctic Expedition, which is a leadership and environmental program. And it was as a result of all of her environmental advocacy that in 2014, Sandika was voted as one of the Mail and Guardian's top 100 climate change leaders in South Africa. And I'm also aware that Sandika has made trips to many very beautiful natural settings around the world, including the Andes Mountains in South America. So Sandika, warm welcome to you. Please share with us.
Thank you, Devendri. Just making sure that my slides work okay.
Are we going to get a chance to see your face first for a little while?
Okay.
I think it'll be lovely for the audience to get to know who we're speaking to. Oh, there you are. Welcome. Welcome to you. Okay, great.
Can you see my slides?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So greetings to everyone. It's been an incredibly interesting webinar. Thanks to all the speakers that came before and Devendri for hosting, as well as Rose. I'm not sure where she is, but it was wonderful to have her speak in the beginning. I've learned a lot already. I'm going to be sharing my reflections on celebrating and nourishing biodiversity. These photographs are flowers from around the world that I have taken during my travels. As Devendri has mentioned, I love interacting with nature in all different parts of the planet. These flowers are from the Seychelles, Canada, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. So in the introduction, I will place the context of myself as a speaker and us as a single species within the Earth's collective biodiversity. This will then be followed by me sharing some reflections on my global adventures. And I will then conclude with simple actions we can all consider taking to nurture this beautiful planet and all its life forms. Actually, some of the previous speakers have touched upon many of the points that I'm going to share with you guys as well. So the topic is nourishing biodiversity. And before I delve into who I am as an individual, I must first reflect on who we are as a single species in the context of all the other life forms that collectively call this planet home. Did you know that humans only make up 0.01% of the Earth's life, but the livestock raised for the sole purposes of our human consumption is 4% of the Earth's total biomass? So this livestock outnumbers the total number of wild animals, which includes wild birds and mammals on our planet. So we all know that approximately 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. Of the remaining landmass, although we are only a tiny percentage of the total life on Earth, 90% of this landmass is used for human activity. This only leaves 10% of true wilderness, and this small percentage is being encroached on even as I speak. Jane Goodall has asked, how is it possible that the most intellectual creature to ever walk the planet Earth is destroying its only home? We all accept that the Earth revolves around the sun, but looking at our current reality, it seems we as a species have created a situation in which we treat the Earth and all other living forms as if it is in existence for the sole purpose of our use, benefit, and consumption. This is a deeply entrenched myth that needs to be transformed. The Earth and all its life forms do not revolve around us as a species in the center. We as a species are not most superior and valuable and important. It is these beliefs that have fueled our actions so that we now face mass extinction of a variety of other life forms. The current global wave of protests around racial injustice are also calling for a transformation of the assumption that all other races orbit around one that is intrinsically more valued and should be honored at the expense of others. As a species, we need to have more humility, more empathy, and more compassion for everyone else within our own species, and we need to also honor all other life forms. So, my name is Sandika Bawalal, as Sibongile mentioned. I have many passions. My day job is an ophthalmic surgeon, where I experience a deep joy in the part I play as a physical restorer of vision to the patients I am privileged to care for. I'm also currently a PhD candidate in postgrad medical and surgical education, because I believe that the role of a teacher is pivotal in any area of life. One of the foundations of my identity is that I'm a soul with intrinsic goodness, as I believe all souls are. I have been meditating for the last 13 years. I also enjoy combining my love of poetry and taking photographs of the earth, and I usually do that and create gifts for close family and friends. But my overarching and lifelong deep love and connection to Mother Earth is going to be the focus for today's sharing. I perceive the earth as a nourishing and deeply spiritual living entity, and feel that love for the earth is the foundation of all solutions linked to preserving its biodiversity in an authentic and sustainable way. So this love for Pachamama has expressed itself in many ways throughout my life. I have had the deep desire to intimately know Mother Earth and the many life forms she supports. So over the years, I have had the deep privilege of visiting all 7 continents, and I will reflect on what I have learned through the biodiversity lens. Of all the continents besides Africa, which is the continent of my birth, my other favorite continent is South America. Interestingly, this is the continent with the richest biodiversity on the planet. Ever since I was in primary school, I have somehow intuitively known within my own heart that the indigenous people of the earth hold intimate knowledge of the earth. And I have since then always wanted to spend time with them, to learn from them and converge Western knowledge systems with the sacred knowledge of indigenous people who honor the earth across the globe. This led me to my first adventure to South America, where I had the deep privilege of learning from the Incan shamans of the Quiro tribe in the Andes, their home. I also had a deeply spiritual experience visiting Iguazu Falls. To me, the earth is a beloved elder. My travels are largely inspired and guided by her. I seek her counsel at crossroads in my life and revel in her joy and wisdom during my travels across her landscape. Engaging with her has always energized me and resulted in deep spiritual realizations. A lot of people find God or Great Spirit in temples and gatherings. I feel divine spirit in the midst of the sacred mountains. And in the midst of Mother Earth's forests and her oceans. I think all the elements have sacredness within them, and experiencing the different elements brings out different aspects of that sacredness. My greatest adventure and some of my deepest spiritual realizations emerged from my journey to Antarctica. It held a very ancient and pure energy. And upon arrival, it felt like you had just stepped into a magical and powerful snow kingdom of Mother Earth. If you ever have the privilege, you will never forget the moment you meet your first iceberg. Antarctica is also the first landmass I had the honor of interacting with, where the land truly belonged to the wildlife. We were visiting them in their home. The penguins had a curiosity about us that was hilarious, waddling towards us, almost getting close enough to touch, then looking up at us, and then waddling away. There was a surprising number of animals that called this place home, despite the cold and windy conditions. There were so many highlights, but another experience I will always remember was my first polar plunge. I loved interacting with the Southern Ocean. As you can see, as I jumped in, I was bracing myself for the cold, but it was a fantastic experience. I remember thinking, now I know what it feels like to feel like $1 million. In fact, I loved it so much, I waited in line for my second polar plunge. So you can tell from my facial expression at this point, I had completely embraced the icy waters. Another amazing experience was camping overnight on the ice, with the seals relaxing a few meters away, a guest in their home. The silence in such deep wilderness had such a deep impression on my soul. I felt like when I went back to the normal way of life, I wasn't the same person. It just very naturally makes you think about what your deep values are, who you are, what your contribution to the world is. And it wasn't an impact that was unique to me. After we spent that night on the ice, and actually even during the trip, everyone was talking about, okay, well, is what I'm doing really important work? How is it impacting the environment? How is it impacting other people? It almost called you to your higher self just by being in her presence. It was one of the most transforming experiences of my life, actually. So after this camping experience, I was inspired to write a poem. A bit of background to this poem. This was one of the first icebergs that I met. And the bleeding blue ice is as a result of the air that gets compressed within the iceberg and begins to absorb and reflect the UV rays. So it actually implies a much older iceberg. My trip to Antarctica definitely ignited a passion to preserve the last great wilderness on our planet, and actually to preserve all wilderness. The reality is we are completely dependent on Mother Earth. If she thrives, all living organisms that call this planet home, including us, flourish. Without the Earth's ecosystem, there would be no fresh air, no clean water, and no food. These are basic necessities for our survival, but we take it for granted every second of our lives. There is an increasing disconnect from nature due to urbanization, an increased use of technology, and an accompanying lack of empathy for nature. This includes the explosion of indoor and virtual recreation options, a lot of which are done on our smartphone. Studies describe nature deficit disorder, which is the human costs of alienation from nature. These include diminished use of the senses, attention difficulties, and higher rates of physical and emotional illnesses. Without that connection to nature, people lose interest in protecting it and fail to see how connected it is to our vitality. But we have to collectively change this trajectory, and it starts by increasing respect and appreciation for the value of nature in our daily lives. We have to collectively take responsibility for the well-being of the planet and all the life it supports. We are the center of the problems facing our planet, and more importantly, we are also the center of the solutions. Ever since human beings came onto this planet, the indigenous people have lived in sacred harmony with nature and maintain a deep connection to it. They have ancient sustainability practices that we could all learn from. Present-day threats to biodiversity include climate change, deforestation, large-scale agriculture, and over-harvesting of resources. Challenges that deeply impact indigenous people. At the same time, the world can help solve these problems by collaborating with indigenous people and integrating their ancient knowledge systems that they have successfully used over thousands of years. So what can each of us do, or each of you attending this webinar do? So some of the everyday activities you could start with include walking outside with the consciousness of the earth and its biodiversity instead of being distracted by your thoughts or your phone. Feel the fresh air in your lungs and look around you for the many living organisms that form part of your neighborhood or community. The birds, the insects, the trees, the flowers. Surprise yourself. Notice something new in your routine walks or while you are on a bus or a train. Instead of looking down into your phone, look up. Feel and see how much life is around you. I do this daily. I walk, it takes me half an hour to walk to work and use the, in addition to using the tube, that's another half an hour. And I love that time. I just love that time to kind of connect to the earth and its energy and nature. And I always feel revitalized after it. And I've been doing this walk for a number of months and it's the same walk. But every time I do it, I notice something else, something new, a new flower. Or as the flower blooms and then it starts to wilt, it looks different. Its personality slightly changes. So I really, really enjoy that. So bring the energy of the earth into your meditation practice as you breathe. I do this as well, and it has helped me connect to myself with greater clarity and greater power. Thank the earth and its bounty every time you eat food or drink water, and you bring that sacredness into that kind of interaction. And eat locally sourced food that is closer to whole plant-based diet, which is good for your ecological footprint, your health, and our planetary home. Whenever you travel, use a mode of transport that is the most gentle on the planet, if at all possible. So in conclusion, no matter where in the world you're watching this from, we are all drawn to spaces that inspire us to try and think differently, and so that we can be different and be better for ourselves and this beloved planet that we call home. And especially during the pandemic, this lesson stands out. We all do better when we all do better. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sandika. You took us around the globe. Okay, so we'll say goodbye to Sandika now, and I'd like to introduce all of you to our final speaker, who's Pratibha Daya from the Brahma Kumaris. Pratibha is a meditation teacher with 34 years of experience in meditation. She's conducted meditation courses, run workshops, led meditation retreats, both nationally as well as internationally. Pratibha has a very gentle and engaging nature, and she has an ability to impart profound spiritual concepts with clarity and with simplicity. Pratibha is a key member of the national coordinating team of the Brahma Kumaris in South Africa, and she also serves as a director on the South African board of the Brahma Kumaris. So a warm welcome to you, Pratibha.
Good evening and greetings of peace to all of you. It's absolutely lovely to be with all of you this evening. What a lovely journey we've had this evening. From the little baby owl that we saw with Dedre, and then the safari tour from Robin and Sandika taking us around the globe, and Kirtanya also just sharing so beautifully various aspects. When I was reflecting on this theme of flourishing futures, and I think we all agree and we all know in our hearts that nature has held us, has sustained us, and is a mother to us. And so in some ways, it is so important for us to honor her and to hold her sacredness and to live with that awareness of her sacredness in terms of our own survival and our own growth and development. But I want to just take one step further this evening and just look at it that when we talk of nature, on the one hand, we think of it in terms of our natural environment, the plants, the trees, the animals, the blue skies, the air we breathe, etc. But the outer nature, this wonderful, diverse world that's been sustaining us and holding us, has a deep connection with our inner nature. So when we talk of our inner nature, we often refer to it in terms of our personality and who we are and how we see ourselves and how we relate to things outside of us based on the kind of awareness we hold of ourselves within. And so in some ways, when I look at the issues of man's relationship with nature, it's really just a reflection of our disconnect with our own natures. In Hindi, there's a beautiful word for nature. It's swabhav. And swa means the self, the inner self, and bhav means feelings and the kind of awareness we hold within the self. So it's like when we talk of swabhav, when we talk of our inner nature, it really is a reflection of how we hold ourselves and how we feel about ourselves and how we connect with ourselves. Because I do feel that the disconnect with the outer nature is because there's a disconnect with our inner nature. We have forgotten who we really are. We see ourselves, you know, when you look at a little child, there's such a sense of curiosity in the world around it, how a little child will be so wonderstruck by a butterfly or by an ant crawling or a beetle on the ground or whatever the case may be. And there's a sense of carefreeness within as the child is exploring the outer world. But as we grow up and the kind of influences that we face, that kind of light, carefree nature begins to get conditioned. And we begin to start creating an image of ourselves that we think we need to live up to, that we think we need to maintain, or that we need, or we think that we need to achieve. And so what happens is that the inner nature of the self, that carefree, light, innocent spirit, gets suppressed in some ways. And we begin to live on the basis of this kind of a external image that we create of ourselves. And with it comes the various expectations and various belief systems about ourselves. So in order for us to really reconnect with Mother Earth, it's a calling for us to reconnect with who we are within ourselves. One of the things that fascinates me about Mother Earth and our natural world is that she has such a capacity to rejuvenate herself. I lived in Cape Town for many years, and annually there were always the wildfires. And after the fires, the earth would look so desolate. But within a short space of time, you would just see how the earth would rejuvenate itself, and how the green shoots will like cut through the ashes, and very soon it would be like nothing had happened. And so what nature does teach us is that there's a natural rhythm. There's a rhythm of birth, and with birth, creativity, newness, a new spark that emerges. And then there's growth and flourishing and abundance and those aspects. And then there is a time for also death and the winter. But each one of these processes within nature are so integrated and balanced that is what makes life sustainable. And so one big lesson that we can take from that is just within ourselves as well, because one of the conditioning in human life, and we spoke about the ego versus the eco, and the one aspect about the ego is that the ego always it creates something and then it holds on to it. It gets attached to it, and then it wants more of it, because there's never a sense of satisfaction with the ego. And you can see how that creates that mindset of exploitation. So the lesson we need to learn from nature, in a sense, is that when we align ourselves to this natural rhythm of birth, growth, and also the winter months, in a sense, the death of something, letting go of things, that it's in that cyclical process that there's a continuity and there's a sustainability that comes in. And so just to look at ourselves, that how ready am I to reinvent myself? How ready am I to let go of old attachments and old ideas and old memories and old experiences, and sort of also allow for that newness internally to occur? Because when we can live in the flow of this internal cycle or law, in a sense, I think we begin to live with the rhythm of nature at the external level as well. One of the things that we see, that everything has a season for it. And so one aspect is, like, for example, strawberries. You get strawberries in a particular season, and we get so attached to the taste of strawberries that even when it's not the season for strawberries, we export it from somewhere else in the world so that we can satisfy that taste. And it's that kind of attitude of the attachment and the hanging on to things that has created the imbalance. If we learn to just live with the flow, I think there will be a kind of a respect and a natural rhythm that will connect us with nature in a more deeper way. So it all comes back to one element that I feel is so necessary, and that is really re-looking at how we define ourselves. We have become very fixed in looking at ourselves in terms of what we look like, what we do, where we live, what we have, etc., etc. So we have become very fixed in our physical identity. But to know that that physical identity is also subjected to change. What I look like today may not be what I look like tomorrow. There's a continuous shift and change that is occurring. But beneath these external elements of the image that I hold of myself is that I am consciousness within. And I was thinking today, as I was going for my walk this afternoon, that how can we explain the concept of consciousness? And just looking at nature in a way that, if you think of a seed holds the full potential, the full knowledge, the full capacity. And it gives birth to this amazing tree that can house many birds and can offer a lot of fruit, but the seed becomes invisible. And so consciousness is like that seed. And our thoughts then stem from this consciousness that gives expression and form, that becomes something that we can all see and we can relate to and we can experience. But but the originator is that tiny seed. And so just coming back to that essence of who I am, that I am consciousness, I am that tiny seed. And yes, I have this incredible capacity and potential to create, to express, to experience. But at the end of the day, to come back to essence, that all of that which I create is subjected to the law of nature. And so it's subjected to change. There's a time of birth, there's a time of growth, there's a time of death. But what remains consistent and eternal within that is that I'm that seed, that point of consciousness, that soul. And when we can begin to really not just know this awareness, but to really experience a deep level of security in feeling this reality of ourselves, then we become more comfortable with change. And I think when we become more comfortable with change around us, we will learn to appreciate nature as well and be able to flow with her flow as well. So just, understanding that how we treat our outer world is really a reflection of how we treat our inner world. And if we can learn to feel that inner security and know that that seed of consciousness, its most innate quality is that of peace, when we reconnect with that, we will feel a connection with everything else around us as well. I'd like to share one experience. It was a few years ago. We had an interfaith gathering at the Flay in Cape Town. And it was just part of a program to really create awareness that the city wanted to build a shopping center around that Flay, and it would have had a huge impact environmentally on that Flay. And that particular Flay was a sacred place for some of the indigenous communities in that area as well. And so, there were various speeches done, and then there was various prayers offered. And I was asked as part of the Brahma Kumaris to share a meditation. And as I was sharing the meditation, I had such a profound experience. The experience was that when I go within and connect with that deepest essence within myself as a soul, as consciousness, as that being of deep peace, that is the essential energy or vibration of all life. That every life, whether it was the fishes in the Flay, or whether it was the trees around me, or whether it was the birds flying overhead, that all life resonates with that deep experience of peace and stillness. And so that was a very profound experience for me to see that at the level of vibration and at the level of our energy, how deeply interconnected we are. And so how can we ever think that we above the ecosystem? We're very much part of it. We're deeply interconnected with it at that deeper level of vibration. So my message today really is that, it's lovely to see how science and spirituality are finding meeting points, and that the one cannot be without the other. And where science is giving us the stats and all of those aspects, I think our hearts need to open through spirituality, and to know that we have a very sacred, interdependent, but a deep interconnected relationship with nature as well. And that how we reconnect with our essence is really going to reflect how we treat nature outside of us. And so the healing of the earth begins with the healing of human hearts. It begins by re-looking and recreating the awareness of who we are as beings that are trustees on this earth. We don't own this earth, we are trustees. And like every other living creature, we're sharing the space. So to have that deep respect and love, both for the self and for every other life form. And it's in this expression of love, in a way, from this deeper spiritual awareness, that then we begin to feel that connectedness with the divine. We cannot feel a sense of connectedness with the divine if we disregard the earth and if we disregard other life forms. The sacredness almost in some ways implies an all-inclusive awareness and attitude that is necessary. And so how we live our lives, and it begins by looking at the quality of my thinking and my attitudes, both towards myself, towards others. It begins by looking at my lifestyle choices. And many of you spoke about the recycling, the compassionate living lifestyles, and what I put into my body as well. All of those aspects, it's really about our deeper contract at the sacred level with ourselves and with all life that connects us with the divine as well. So those were a few thoughts that I wanted to share, and just seeing that, the earth is abundantly beautiful, but we are part of that abundant beauty as well. We've just forgotten who we are, and as we reconnect, I think then we can contribute in a more living and natural way to that deeper beauty and abundance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sis. May I ask you to please lead us into a short meditation, just so that we can hold that feeling that you created by the insights that you've shared. Thank you.
Thank you, certainly. So just for this meditation, I invite you to just take in a deep breath and gently just allow yourself to relax. In this moment, just allow yourself to return to that deeper essence within. So beneath the external identities we hold, beneath the covering of our bodies, the deep within we are that invisible, incognito point of consciousness, that living seed. And to hold that awareness of ourselves as this living light. See yourself as consciousness, as a point of light. That all life holds the energy of light within. And as I hold this awareness of my inner self as light, very naturally, I return to a sacred space within me, of peace. Just allow the self to step into that inner space, that sacred space of peace and stillness within. I am peace. And as you feel that peace and stillness within, just sense that kind of freedom and openness and timelessness of your being. And when I come to peace, I come to my true inner power. I feel anchored. And this peace that you feel within, just hold that awareness that this peace resonates, connects with every life form. We all share this vibration of peace. And in this awareness, just feel that deep interconnectedness. We are not alone, but there's a sacred thread between all of us. And that sacred thread of peace is what's created the world that we live in. And as I return to this place of peace within me, I share this vibration and I revitalize this vibration in all around me. And so just feel the wholeness of peace as we all return to our own sacredness of peace. And it's in this deep, interconnected experience together that we feel the profound presence of the divine. That when we return to this pure place within us, the divine God holds us in this energy of peace. And it's in this pure awareness and this pure vibration that we become instruments to channel peace into the world and help restore to the sacred truth of who and what we are and the sacred beauty of our earth again. We return to wholeness again. So for a moment, just hold this feeling of the interconnectedness between us. Feel the power of God's love and light and the sacredness of this moment of peace. Thank you.
And thanks to you, sis. Thank you very much. That was so soothing and so nourishing. So we've already run out of time. And so my suggestion is that we won't go into the question and answers, because I think really every speaker has shared in such an in-depth and rich way, and we've taken a lot from them already. Firstly, I would like to really just extend a very, very, very heartfelt thank you to each and every one of our wonderful guest speakers for having really enriched our evening, enriched our lives, opened our eyes and opened our hearts, you know, to the wonderful biodiversity that's out there. And thanks to you for sharing very specific ways in which we can integrate ourselves so that we can coexist with more harmony. So I'm very grateful to each of you. Thank you. And a special thank you also to our participants, whoever gave their evening to join us and go along this journey with us. I just want